Hi, this is Tara Spalding, Managing Director of Boom Startup Accelerator. Today, I have a very special guest on our podcast. It's Ray Wang, the founder and principal analyst at Constellation Research. Ray, thank you so much for being on our show today. Let's talk a little bit about Constellation Research and also the book that you are launching in just a few more weeks.
Thanks for having me here, Tara. What Constellation Research is we're basically an early adopter innovation digital transformation firm. We've been spending time researching where digital transformation has been going since 2010. And as part of that, we tend to work with some really cool companies, innovative startups, innovative leaders in typically global 2000 organizations, those that are really trying to push for change. Every year we have our Business Transformation 150, which is like a global list of the top transformation change agents in the world. And of course, we have some fun events where we bring together innovation technologists, and sometimes policy all into one spot. And so that's what we typically pull. I've been in tech for a very long time.
Yes, you have. And our careers have crossed paths several times. The one thing I really admire about you, Ray, is that you have a really keen sense on the major market signals and how that affects massive markets like enterprise software, for example. And your firm does such a great job at keeping contact with not only what's going on in technology, but also working with these companies that are using it to get that sort of advantage. I just can't say enough on how helpful and resourceful the Constellation team is.
Oh, well, thank you.
Today it's about a very special occasion, which is introducing your new book that's coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about Everybody Wants to Rule the World?
Well, I think what's been going on is we've been talking about digital transformation since 2010, and what we've been looking at is what's our success factors. How are people doing a good job? Who's going to be the next set of winners? How people are making that transition from a culture perspective, an organizational perspective, thinking about their product and their service offerings that are out there. The challenge, though, is the thesis is being rewritten. About 3 years ago, we started trying to figure out why companies that have been successful in digital transformation were not winning in the market. And part of the reason they weren't winning in the marketplace, we realized that there was a new model that was being created. And these companies that were digital giants had entered the market and completely changed the nature of not only how competition works, how people compete for data, what types of services and organizations pop up. And this is really creating a new type of startup. And examples of this would be like a Roblox, or companies like a Stripe, or companies like a Coupang, or companies like Airbnb and DoorDash. These were completely changing the rules of the game, and they had followed what the big digital giants, the ones that first came out, your Google, your Facebook, your Amazon, your Netflix, those companies, in terms of how they entered the market. So there is something different in the market, and it's more than digital transformation.
Let's talk about a little bit about this moment, because I think this is really keen insight. And I'm assuming this took, over 3 years of research and work to identify this sort of trend. This moment, it sounds like there's aspects of, the accessibility for the new wave of technology. And then there's new aspects on go-to-market strategy, especially for startups. These are really important and new opportunities for them to explore. Can you dive in a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we can start by thinking the reason it took so long to write about this is we were in the midst of it. Just like the last book that came out, Disrupting Digital Business, we started the firm in 2010, and then 5 years later, we wrote the book. The same thing happened this time. It took me about 3 years to realize the trend was happening and how to really quantify what was going on. And I'll give you a great example. We use Domino's Pizza as our poster child, right? They're the ones that won the digital transformation battle. You can order pizza on your mobile device easily. You can order it from Alexa. It can track where your pizza order is. Your the order's been placed. It's in the oven. It's 10 minutes away from your house. It's 5 minutes away from your house. You can even take a picture of the Domino's Pizza and send it to their AI engine, and they'll tell you the quality of the franchisee, right? So these guys have won it. They got the business models done. Their stock went from $3 to 350, in 10 years. I mean, that's amazing returns. And that's like, they're a tech company. They're not a pizza company. They're a tech company. Here's the challenge though. How often do you order pizza, Tara? Do you order
Well,
once a week?
once a week,
Do you order
exactly.
once a month? And do you order Domino's? And that's the interesting question. Now you don't have to answer that. I won't put you on the spot. But the point being is, how often do you order from food delivery apps? Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub. People order from them probably 2, 3, even 4 times more than they order from Domino's Pizza. And so what we have is a series of things that have occurred. And this is a great example of a digital giant in action. First, restaurant owners who couldn't get their delivery out basically gave their customers away to these food delivery app companies. Second, these food delivery app companies not only took the customers because this was the easiest place to order. You go first to food delivery app, not to the restaurant, unless you want a specific food from that restaurant. But you can go to food delivery apps first because you don't know what you want to eat. And so, because of that choice, you give the customer data to them, you give the payment information to them. And I can tell you in your zip code, I mean, someone might be more interested in Thai food than they would be in Italian. All right. And once you figure that out, you can start building out ghost kitchens and complete the line. You won't need those restaurants anymore. So customer account disintermediation is number one. The second thing is they take that data and they use that to actually compete. And then the third thing is you start monetizing against that data by figuring out, do I build out a restaurant? Do I do something different? Do I create a new search paradigm for that? Do we change the way we look at advertisement and placement? And then, of course, you're off to build the biggest network, trying to get from not thousands of customers. You now have millions of customers. And then more importantly, these companies can lose hundreds of millions and their investors don't care so long they're growing and they're gaining market share. Domino's can't do that, right? And this is really why we're talking about this shift. And digital transformation is no longer enough. You have to have the right business models that are out there, and the digital giants are showing you how they rule the world.
Oh, that's amazing. So, for the hope and the opportunity to get into basically that world sort of play, what kind of tips or tricks or insight would you offer founders and startups?
That hope and opportunity that you're talking about, there's lots of opportunities to participate in those ecosystems of digital giants. There are very, very few opportunities to actually create the next digital giant, but that is possible. If you take those 5 things, you have an opportunity to go out and build it. And each of these steps, we talk about how the digital giants do it and how you can do it inside the book. But I think the greatest opportunity today is really finding that intersection between how you want to compete with a market leader and how you want to organize the rest of the market, where you've got small businesses where they can band together to create new types of markets. You saw that happen prior to the pandemic with taxi companies building their own apps to compete against Uber and Lyft and getting everyone together. It's hard. It's hard being in terms of that kind of consortium or group. And so I think companies have gotten really smart about trying to figure out which platforms and which ecosystems to be part of so that they can be successful and grow their business and eventually jump to different platforms and ecosystems and hopefully own their own.
Oh, that's great. Ray, this is just so helpful information. I'm so excited to get my copy of the book, and it's just only a couple of weeks away. Now, let's talk about like when you wrote this book, who was your intended reader? Because everybody wants to rule the world. I think it actually applied to many of us, including like the investor and academic communities as well.
Yeah, so the book started out trying to figure out for Fortune 500 Global 2000 leaders how they're going to survive this onslaught, how they're going to get through competing with these new types of market players, which are basically in every industry. They're not just in one industry. And so the first part is really how do you build your digital giant? How do you understand that? The second part was really, what was required to compete with the digital giant. How do you actually build partnerships and joint venture startups to do that? And the third part was really written for policymakers and regulators so that they understand how to look at the difference between cost benefit analysis and a proportional response. And so this is for executives, this is for boardroom folks, this is for people who are startup innovators that are trying to figure out how to build their next big great startup. And of course, it's really for investors trying to figure out how to assess which big tech companies are going to do really well in the next 5 years and which ones might go away.
Oh, I'm so excited for my copy, Ray. This is amazing. But you also have a wonderful sense of identifying the sort of capital play and strategy to really fuel the bloom of those transformations. And then you just touched on a very last and important point. And you and I talked about this, especially during COVID, which are policies and looking at policies from a cost perspective. Hats off to you. I can only assume that you're watching what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now very closely with everything that's going on at the Capitol Hill. But it sounds like all of those aspects are included in the book to really compel people's thoughts on the approach.
Yeah, we definitely are, right? I think some folks are just raising the let's go after a big tech giant issue so that they can run for higher office, and that's fine. Other folks are seriously looking at what type of regulations required to make that successful, and I think we have to balance. This is the important piece. And when I talk about cost benefit analysis and proportional response, right now in the dawn and the rise of digital giants, what's happening is they're providing lots of consumer benefit, massive amounts of innovation, prices are coming down, and you can't regulate things like this, right? That's not a bad thing. But what you have to do is take the existing regulation, which we have lots of, from Sherman antitrust to Clayton Act to some of the antitrust rules we have. They're there, right? And what you can realize is like, hey, when competition is being squashed, when prices are going up, when we're no longer getting those consumer innovations, then we're going to have to put some measures in place, right? But we can do some things today, like, for example, make data a property right. That means you basically own your data. People have to have consent to use your data, or make data portability occur, which I saw in one of the bills, which makes sense. That data is yours. You can transfer it to another system or another network. It's not easy to do, but we'll have to see how they do that.
Oh, I love it. And this is just fantastic. I do think that us as a society need to absolutely expand us just beyond our physical rights, because this data transformation is part of ruling the world. And so, our lawmakers, as well as, the data creators and data managers have an onus and responsibility, which is just a very daunting task ahead of us all. So let's go back to your book. And, when is it released? How can people get it?
So, for everyone listening here, we've got something set up where if you purchase the book before the release date and do the pre order by July 13th, you can actually get the first 3 chapters right now, which is pretty cool. And so, we'll provide you the link and use the link to definitely get there. The book comes out July 13th in bookstores everywhere. So, you can definitely find that wherever books are sold. And then, more importantly, check out the website at raywang.org, raywang.org, and you'll see information about book tours and different kind of comments and blogs as they come around. And of course, on the LinkedIn profile.
Ray, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me.